Okay, so one of the reasons that I say that I didn't learn anything in college was because they just don't really teach you anything. Uh, they don't teach you the whole thing. They just teach you how to make money. They don't teach you any of the ethics. So when I talk about people pushing wheelbarrows of money down the street in Alcobar, where I lived, uh, well, one of the things they teach you in the top 10 business schools in the United States, right? Because my dad was involved with all that shit going on uh, closely. I mean, we lived with the Kashoggis, not Jamal. He wasn't anybody. We lived with Assam, who's Adnan's brother. So, if you, now everybody knows the name Kashoggi because somebody chopped one up, fed him to the fish or something. But for people who are a little more interested in what goes on in this world, they know very well about who Adnan was. And Assam was his younger brother, and Assam was just as, I mean, he was the CEO or whatever, or president of Triad. Triad was the company that they created to move all their money around and to keep money in the United States. I mean, they weren't stupid. They wanted to uh, have wealth in the United States. Assam is an American citizen at this point, I'm sure. Not a permanent residence like Jamal was. Uh, I think probably, Assam was good at reading the writing on the wall, right? I mean, he got out of Beirut way before we did because my dad wanted to be in Beirut because he was an asset, not official capacity. NOC. NOC. Um, so this, uh, I want to talk about how people like my dad, conservatives, get the wrong idea about things because they don't understand. And like I was taught in college, that I remember very well that one day um, my microeconomics professor, who was the head of the college, by the way, a Chinese guy, I think he was a Chow, I can't remember now off the top of my head. Uh, and in fact, I think he's still there uh, at Cameron Business School and University of St. Thomas. And he told us a lot of things. And from the perspective of simply making money and being powerful, sure, colleges, but I never wanted to be that. So it's kind of useless to me. And they didn't teach you any of the morals or ethics involved. Those were left up to you. And I think it was strongly implied that you shouldn't have any. I mean, simply by not even bothering to discuss them, probably because they didn't have any morals or ethics, you're implying that. You're certainly not implying anything to the opposite, right? By not discussing it. So what they told you was that one of the ways to be successful in a capitalist system is to imitate successful people. So if you saw somebody making a lot of money selling shoes, you looked at how they did it, What was their advertising strategy? What was their placement? Where did they set up a shop? Um, how did they get funding? Everything. So, uh, obviously, and so I asked my dad, I just got done telling you about the wheelbarrows. I said, well, aren't they worried about somebody stealing their money? I mean, they're just walking down the street with a wheelbarrow full of cash. And Dad said no, because somebody tried that and they cut their hands off. Well, you have to understand that when a conservative American like my father lives in a country like Saudi Arabia and they see that there's no crime, at least you can walk down the street with a wheelbarrow full of Saudi riyals, which were very valuable back then. No, not as valuable as probably dollars, but because they were based off of the dollar. But when you see that as a conservative, you think, well, that is a successful strategy, cutting people's hands off or whatever, some kind of really cruel and unusual punishment that stops people from stealing, and it creates a situation where a wealthy person can, because believe me, everybody in Saudi Arabia wasn't walking around with wheelbarrows full of cash. You had to either be Saudi Arabian, if you were a Saudi citizen, which means that you were a member of the royal family in the beginning, then you could get these loans. Afterwards, it was extended to people like the Kashoggis. All these people worked for the royal family. Okay, so there you go. There's your connection, your capitalist connection. But what I'm talking about is an American like my dad. So he would come back to the United States and people are shooting each other in the street, robbing banks. And he'd say to himself, well, maybe we should cut a few hands off. I mean, that's where a farm boy who's raised up to the level of a CEO, a captain of capitalism. Capitalism. Gee, is that a coincidence? No, I don't think so. Obviously, or capped, whatever is going to turn out to be a Latin word that has to do with leadership or something, with money or something. Maybe both. Maybe because they're both the same thing in a capitalist system. Money and power are very equivalent. So that's how a conservative, a farm boy, a very patriotic person, and I mean that in the worst way, absolutely, because patriotism to me is caring about everybody in your country, not just your little group. And that's what conservatism is about. It's caring about your little group and not caring when you see the suffering outside of that group. That suffering, the happiness and well-being of the people within your group is dependent upon the suffering of the people outside your group. So that's what I'm saying is, and a lot of Americans go overseas and see this. And it's for show. It really is for show. It may be real, but I assure you that the wealthy people, the bad people in the country who are hiring people to go work for Blackwater and what have you, they know that when they get over there, they're going to see things that through the narrative they will use to justify what they're doing. murdering people, torturing people, what have you. So that's what I'm saying. So I'm just saying that people like my dad, they they become ambivalent towards all suffering outside of their own group because they have this reinforcement through these experiences that they have, you know, and just like me, they were taught that imitation, and you can figure that out for yourself, right? Like I am going to point out later on, a lot of what you're taught in education is stuff you already know. They just present it to you in a way to make you feel like they're teaching it to you. And then, of course, you owe them. And that's what this is all about, right? I mean, the whole segment that I'm doing, it's all about the I can't call them elite because they're not hard. The only respect that they're elite is that they are on the top, and they get there by making everybody down below them feel like they owe them, whether it's giving out zero interest loans with no timetable to pay them back. I mean, isn't that right there saying you can owe me forever? So obviously I'm all right with that, right? Okay, so you've got a bunch of money, you're able to trade that and work with that, but at the same time, until you pay it back, you owe everything to me. And of course, the kingdom was all right with that. That money to them, it was it didn't put a dent in their wealth, right? They just print up more reals. So they put all these people in debt to them, and then when they didn't like each other, when they turned on each other for whatever reason, we'll probably find out it was a lot about money. Maybe the ultra rich aren't so ultra rich anymore. So they could just say to all these people who were writing critical articles in the newspapers and stuff, they say, they show up at their door with a bunch of thugs and put them in handcuffs and drag them off to a restaurant or a hotel and hold them there, knowing that they could be killed at any time, and tell them we want our money back now. Not only that, but they're probably pretty well aware that they're not welcome in Saudi Arabia anymore, that they're not, so that money was highly dependent on kissing somebody's ass, right? In reality, when you get right down to it.